Well, how fitting that one of the rare hate crimes actually caught on camera, with the suspect quickly identified, is one for which there is very little media concern, much less some broader narrative about how our country is becoming less tolerant and more violent, because of course this is the sort of intolerance and violence that doesn't count, or maybe it does count, but it's actually the good kind. I discussed the case of this Trump yard sign burning in Raleigh, North Carolina on the Sunday stream, but I'm returning to it because there have been so many developments within the last few days. John Kane is a businessman and a father of 3. Outside his home, he has a Trump Won sign displayed under an American flag. On August 12th, a passing cyclist approached John's property, observed the sign, and kicked it with such futility, you gotta wonder how his legs were strong enough to bike there in the first place. Undeterred, this cyclist returned 3 days later and lit the sign on fire. John replaced the sign, and the cyclist returned 3 days later again to burn the sign once more. In a video later, John, the homeowner, gave some more context to the layout of the area. That sign was below an American flag. That American flag was attached to a tree, and those tree canopies linked directly to John's home, where his family was sleeping inside.
That fire goes from that tree to my house. I have 3 young children. They sleep upstairs. I hate to think what could be going on today as a result of this crazed maniac's actions.
Over the weekend, it was tempting to think that even though this crime was clearly caught on camera, this event would not be a law enforcement priority. And even if this guy was identified, a friendly prosecutor would probably just let him go anyway. And there may be some of that at work still, but never underestimate the investigative power of the internet. John Kane, the homeowner, was personally offering a $1,000 reward for an ID on this arsonist. Tim Pool and Benny Johnson joined with $5,000 pledges each, and a man in California who wishes to remain anonymous pieced it all together with the evidence that was obviously available and some creative thinking to find some more. This cyclist arsonist made the crucial error of leaving a distinct tattoo on his right inside forearm clearly visible, so any internet images of him discovered would establish a positive ID. But he also apparently made the crucial error of tracking his incriminating bike rides on the internet. Searching Strava, this anonymous investigator was able to identify a profile that matched the locations and times of these hits on the Trump sign. Sure enough, that Strava profile belongs to one Jim White, and images of Jim on social media clearly show that same forearm tattoo. Job well done by this e-detective, or maybe job very poorly done by the arsonist. Either way, it sounds like the guy who cracked the case will be paid by those who pledged. But of course, identifying this guy is only the first part of the effort for justice, because there's still the actual justice part, as in charging and convicting him for his criminal act. And there will actually be at least some criminal pursuit of the case. In perhaps a surprising move on Monday, the Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman, a Democrat, announced she will file charges against White, the cyclist arsonist, but only 2 misdemeanor charges of injury to real property. The DA says she's in the process of serving the guy with the charges and can't comment further until that has happened. And there are 2 ways to look at that move, with some surprise that anything is being done at all, or with what is a pretty good case that this guy is still getting away far too easily, because there's a compelling argument that he is. On Monday night, the homeowner, John Kane, posted a video to his Twitter account analyzing the North Carolina statutes that apply. First, there's the misdemeanor crime of injury to real property, for which this guy is being charged. Any person who willfully and wantonly damages, injures, or destroys any real property shall be guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. Considering the guy brought a lighter twice and ran away from the fires that he started, that's a court case that should last only as long as the video itself. It's indisputable. But as John argues, wasn't the crime a little more severe than that? If it was just kicking down the sign, if this cyclist actually had the leg strength to do it, sure. That's low-level damage to low-level property. As a criminal matter, that's minimal. But of course, it wasn't just that. It was multiple instances of not just damaging the sign, but doing it with fire in a way that endangered the rest of the property and the lives living on it. So surely there must be a statute that considers those factors, right? Indeed there is, and that's why John makes his case for a felony charge, arson. Under this statute, it is a felony to intentionally set fire to personal property with intent to injure or prejudice the property owner. As John describes, if this charge was brought, a North Carolina jury would be instructed that this crime entails 3 elements that the prosecution must prove, all of which sound readily provable.
The state must prove 3 things beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant intentionally set fire to my sign.
Well, considering he brought a lighter and did it twice, yeah, that's inarguable.
Next, the defendant did so wantonly and willfully with the knowledge or reasonable grounds to believe that this act would endanger the rights or safety of others. Well, he intentionally moved the American flag that hangs above the political sign while he looked at my house. Why would you move that flag?
Good point. That piece, too, is on video. Why would he move the flag other than because he knows the sign fire could ignite the flag, which could ignite the trees, which could ignite the home itself? So points 1 and 2, all but inarguable.
And third, that the defendant did so with the intent to injure or prejudice the owner. This intent may be inferred from the nature of the act, the manner in which the act was done, or the conduct of the parties.
Well, there's no doubt that this arsonist intentionally burned John's property. That's already established. But as John describes, just in case there's any lingering doubt about the type of intent or the sort of intent that this arsonist had toward John's property and John's family, this arsonist did not commit this act with precision and oversight to make sure that only the sign burned. He didn't extinguish the fire once that specific goal was achieved. Instead, he lit the fire and he ran away without any concern for how that fire may spread.
He took the time to move that American flag thinking hopefully it wouldn't catch on fire. And then did he wait and see if that tree caught on fire that was hanging out right above my sign? No, he took off. He didn't give a damn.
Now, it is, of course, fair to acknowledge that a key to any successful prosecution is bringing the appropriate charge that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because an overcharge has the same effect as no charge at all, no conviction if you bring something beyond what you can prove. So maybe that's what the prosecutor is thinking, but what part of John's case just described lacks substantiation beyond a reasonable doubt? Whatever doubt there may be about what this guy was doing is removed by the fact that he did it twice in separate early morning incidents. Also, fair to question, if this DA is bringing such minor charges because she's careful and thorough not to overcharge, why did it take so long to be careful and thorough enough to identify the suspect in the first place? According to a civil complaint John is also filing, John made a police report on August 15th after the first arson incident. And then, for over a week, there was no ID on the suspect. Instead, that ID only came through the anonymous work of an internet volunteer, and only then did the DA file charges. If not for that internet sleuthing, I think it's fair to bet that this case would have just faded away, and this arsonist would have never been found despite the relative ease of finding him. And I don't say that to dismiss the work of the internet volunteer. I think he did a great job. It's just that if some rando in California can identify this guy as a hobby in only a few hours or days, then surely people whose job is investigating crime in the Raleigh area can do at least as good of a job if they wanted to. And yeah, I know, Raleigh is a major city. There are murders and other very serious crimes to investigate with limited resources. I get it. But while it's easy to dismiss this crime as minor because nothing all that serious actually happened, the fact that it didn't is only by the grace of God, not by any sort of care or concern on the part of this criminal. That is to say, the consequences for tolerating this sort of behavior are, in fact, very serious, even if this particular episode of it ended up not being so. John explains it well. A country that doesn't take such a thing seriously is a country asking for more serious crime and injustice.
I don't care who you support politically. None of us can accept a country where someone can be so triggered by someone's support of a majority party political candidate that they come and commit premeditated arson on their home. We can't live in a country that allows this. There must be an equal application of the law.
Oh, but would you say the same thing if it was a pride flag or a Joe Biden flag? First of all, nobody actually flies a Joe Biden flag. To John's point with his sign, not only does Joe Biden hold the record for most presidential votes ever, he also holds the record for least enthusiastic votes ever, too. It's a very odd combination. But secondly, and more importantly, yes, criminal charges should apply to the burning of personal property at the homes of people who disagree with me, too, because that is a matter of basic morality and justice. I'll give you an example. Almost every day I drive, not cycle, because I'm a civilized person, but I drive by a house with a stupid flowery Pride Progress flag that says, "You are loved" on it. It looks exactly like this one. And I will confess that one time my out-of-control wife rolled down her window and yelled, "I don't love you," at this house. And you may say that was uncourteous, but she too is entitled to her view in response. As a matter of speech, I think that house is doing a terrible thing in propagating a lie that men can be women and women can be men, which one, is not true biologically, and two, leads to horribly unhappy outcomes for those who believe it. For those reasons, my wife and I share a strong, even in one case vocal, moral opposition to that message. But would we ever actually set fire to that flag or that house? No, of course not. Because that homeowner's property rights and physical safety are more important than our moral or political disapproval. And if we ever did set fire to that flag or otherwise sabotage the property, yes, we should expect serious charges and punishment. Now, of course, many of the same people who would minimize this Trump sign arson would likely simultaneously argue for harsh treatment for my wife on some sort of harassment grounds. Yelling about someone's opinion is as bad or worse as burning their property over it. It just depends on if the opinion is quote-unquote correct or not. If the severity of the crime is determined by what opinions it upholds, well, we have officially inverted our country's moral compass and the moral truth of the matter. That's ideology first and rights of the people second. If you ever wonder how the worst acts in history get committed, well, it often follows that same logic. Oh, those people didn't matter anyway, because after all, they believed the wrong thing. Viewpoints do not determine rights, and they don't determine a life's value. Those things are inherent. And every step we take in deteriorating that moral truth is another step toward suffering serious consequences for it. Although I must confess, even if I can uphold these principles for trans activists, the cyclists really do make it tough. First, it's the outfits, then the morphing from vehicle to pedestrian, depending on which rules of the road they want in that moment, and now nearly burning your house down intentionally, and all of this committed with a smug, self-righteous attitude about saving the environment from you, the guy driving to work at the plant to manufacture their stupid bike in the first place. So maybe I will compromise just a little. Liberty and justice for all, except cyclists, because after all, they've had way too much liberty and way too little justice for far too long now. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Minds. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Come on.